Hey everybody, Scott George again, here's another entry in the Wolf and the Neural Network. This time we're going to discuss the day of the false arrest, which was August 2nd, 2022. My visit to the QEII Emergency, and then subsequent delivery to Mount Hope, where I was humiliated, belittled, and degraded by the psychologist. And you'll note in this video I'm going to make a serious case that they not only slandered and defamed me and generated a false record, but they engaged in torture and coercive torture, while subjecting me to a serious and quantified instance of cruel and unusual punishment and stripping any sense of life, liberty, or security of person. And it's important to note before we get started that within the Involuntary Psychiatric Treatment Act, the IPTA, which I was arrested under, it clearly states any declaration of involuntary admission or declaration of incapacity is made on the basis of evidence. Please keep that in mind. Well, at the same time, Halifax Regional Police stated they were a conflict of interest and they don't take complaints, and stated that I have to go to professional services, when you'll note right on the halifax.ca website, it states that no complaint can be made to any Halifax Regional Police officer, and this includes a complaint regarding the Chief of Police, meaning that statement was completely inaccurate and misleading that they were making in regards to this. They did have to take the complaint. And so we're required to properly evaluate the evidence before arresting me under the IPTA. So, we discussed the part of the false arrest in the other video regarding Jonathan Jeffries and his flagrant disregard for basic dignity and respect, which isn't surprising. We discussed all the evidence leading up to this, how they knew my letter and stuff was coming on around November 19th, 2019, as the EMIC contracts had started on July 5th, 2019, 21 days before my last day at J.D. Irving. We talked about finding the police vest associated with the same officer who stalked me out of my sister's driveway because I'm a gay bro. About the stalking incidents with the police, about when my face popped up in the newspaper, my internet got cut for 2 days at the house. The EMIC contracts, my GPS location being set to these places. Hey, we talked about the wolves howling in the EMIC contracts. We talked about the supply and confidence agreement with the government after I said I caught them with the whole post-media thing. We talked about the day Kevin Mooney resigned, the day I get my Freedom of Information request back from Halifax Regional Police. Talked about the multiple hacking with the different lawyers, and that's a short list of the stuff that had happened, Burschel's and Valent Legal. We talked about my accounts being locked the day I walked down Halifax Regional Police. We talked about the property reviews coinciding with the letters and me begging them to not make me do this. We talked about getting the email confirmations back from Halifax Regional Police when I sent out the alpha version, and going back as far as 2021. We also talked about the August 5th when I sent that letter out to J.D. Irving and those other individuals, and the next day, August 6th, 2020, Stephen McNeil resigning. We also discussed me finding the signal from a possible radio transmitter when I was setting up a cell repeater 50 feet behind my house, and then finding another signal by the house next to me, where ultimately the police were found 2 days after I got admitted to Mount Hope. And this seemed to show, for some reason, that the location was out in the Atlantic Ocean. That's just a short list of the different events that occurred. There's events where they threatened my disabled sick mother, where there were private investigators watching children so bad that they were reported as pedophiles, and it was reported to RCMP twice, and RCMP did nothing and didn't contact them back. Really bad stuff. And if even 1% of that happened to these people, they'd have a serious problem with it, right? I'm sure everybody watching this would agree. But I deserved it. All these other people deserved it. That's right. If anybody did that to Dan Kinsella, what do you think he'd do? No. And what would Justin Trudeau or Tim Houston or the Liberal government, what would they do if somebody did that to them? Well, just for some words that were in context in the very question of when do words become worse than what these people did, look what they did to me. Had me terrorized by men with guns. Right? Anybody did that to them officers, what would they do? Yeah. I got arrested going down there for all this facts and evidence. Being kind, calm, cool, and collected. Yeah, everybody knows. There are two kinds of white in this fucking country. So anyways, I get taken down to Mount Hope. Or I get taken down to QEII Emergency, and they're parading me through like a criminal. See, they got to make it look like I'm a criminal, like I'm some kind of bad person, right? The whole point is to dehumanize and humiliate. To hope that it, will deter me from asking good questions, And that's what makes this a terrorist attack, right? Because they intentionally did that to terrorize somebody. That was their hope, and hoping that it would change their behavior. I wasn't manic. I didn't do anything wrong. And when you see the rest of the police report, you're going to see that. It doesn't make any sense, nor does my behavior then after the fact, nor does it even make sense for me to go down there and act in any type of, manic type of way. Like, I was fully aware of what was going on right up until the moment going down. I gave them up to the minute updates about where I was. So, right, and but to add to that, we go back and show you that when I sent the Wolf in the Neural Network out, I did get that confirmation from Halifax Regional Police, right? So I did not lie about any of this. I'm down there, and I'm with the original two officers. Now, I'm going to be very candid about this, right? So before we had walked in, I'll be honest, I shed a tear. Just one. Because I was like, I know what they're going to do. I didn't cry. I didn't do anything like that. But I was like, I know what these monsters are, and I know what they're going to do. Once those monsters started that, there was nothing they could even do to stop it. Right? Immediately when they arrested me, they seen how calm I was. And it's like, you didn't mention that in your police report, did you? Because it doesn't match what you put in there, and you know that. And I heard the officers talking behind the car that they knew something was wrong. They had reasonable doubt. And I had asked the officer, I was like, look, man, it's bad enough I'm going in there with, handcuffs and stuff on. Can you just wipe this tear away from my face? I can't do it because they had me rested behind my back. And he's just, coming at me, kind of weird. I was like, listen, bro, I'm not going to say you touched me or did anything. I promise you. Just show me that dignity and wipe that away for me. And he did. So we went in and, got registered and everything. I was completely calm. Sat there, in the bigger room, all these people looking at me, like I'm some kind of criminal or something, completely to slander and defame me. It was intentional. They knew what they were going to do. And I went to get registered, and the woman, they took my blood pressure and stuff, and she said, and I asked her, is it good? Because I don't know much about medical stuff. That's one thing that really grosses me out, and I get really, I think because I think about the process so much, oh God. And I asked her, is my blood pressure good? And she's like, yeah, it's really good. Do you know why you were brought in here? And I said, I went down asking questions about the chief of police. And she said, really? Are the handcuffs really necessary? Because anybody seeing me would know that I wasn't manic or anything. I was completely calm, rational, dignified human being. What was occurring to me was not dignified, right? So by this time, that man, the guy, had left, and I was left with the female officer. And like I said to that officer, and I told him, I was like, look, there's nothing you guys can do now, but you just don't lie on that record, because there's nothing I can do to help yous, And I didn't really say too much. With that woman, we talked a little bit, but I don't think it was very much in-depth conversation or anything like that. And then we went back to the behind the doors after you get admitted or whatever, and that's where I would have ultimately waited for about the next 9 hours. I would have sat there with being denied a lawyer, never being told what my actual rights were. I did state, because of the way the law is written, and I stated it very just I don't really know what my rights are, so I'm going to say is this habeas corpus, because this is an unlawful detention. the amount of time that I'm being held is excessive. I'm just sitting there completely calm. I haven't done anything. Um, and So at one point, the female officer, she left, and another officer came. And this officer was like, she was really nice to me. And you'll see in my report, guys, I was super fair to these officers. I said that at no point did they make me feel unsafe or did they demean me as a human being. Okay, and I stand by that. I mean, the fact that they falsely arrested me, yeah, that's pretty bad. But I mean, after the fact, they didn't like yell in my face. They didn't call me. They didn't do anything like that. Okay? And the only way this is going to work is if I'm completely honest and completely fair, because you're not going to trust me for the rest of it. And I never went to go after those officers. And you'll see in my requests to Jonathan Jeffries and stuff, I said Dan Kinsella can come forward and take responsibility for this instead of the officers having to deal with that, because he should have in the first place. Now, I just talked with the woman and just explained a little bit of what happened. And I was just like really respectful conversation. And I was with her for a little bit, and you know, there was never any issues. She didn't seem like she had a problem with me. It never felt like those officers felt they were unsafe or had a problem with me at any point. And I don't think that they're going to say that they did. And I mean, if they did, then it's like, that is why people don't trust police, guys. So you can say what you want, but you all know that I was a decent human being to you. And so eventually, this woman, I liked her. I liked her. She had to go as well, and then I would have gotten the cop that I was with for a long time. The guy I got really defensive about with Jonathan Jeffries to make sure he did not target that guy. Because like I said, what I'm going to explain next, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that could have been better and done differently, and there's definitely going to be opportunities. But that guy never made me feel unsafe, and he didn't treat me like, yeah. I liked him. I know that's not going to help me here, or whatever. It's not about helping me, it's about being honest, and I liked him. I don't... We'll get to it. So... eventually, we were talking and stuff, and he wasn't very much of like a big talker, like he didn't yap or go on or anything like that. He was very like reserved in the words that he would say in his opinions. And you know, you'll say, Scott, it was a bad idea to talk to the police. It's like, I'm just sitting there talking about bro things, like what else do I have to do? I'm not trying to manipulate this guy. I think he knows that. There's no way to manipulate. I'm in handcuffs or whatever. I mean, that opinion's already made up about me. It's like... And, so, at one point, you know, they did come to take my blood, and I said, you know, this is inappropriate. I don't consent to this. And then I was told that it makes me look guilty, and why do I have a problem with that? And it's like, because, like, I'd asked for a lawyer several times, so I know what my rights are. I've been sitting here for a long time. And, you know, and even the Nova Scotia Health Authority staff member made me feel very uncomfortable about it. And, you know, like, given the fact that I'm stating I'm being brought in here and the police are stating that they're a conflict of interest, is it really appropriate to go and then force me to have my blood taken and telling me that makes me look guilty if I don't? No, I think that's incredibly inappropriate. And it's extremely unethical. And Nova Scotia Health Authority should absolutely speak to their employees and make them understand, you know, like what somebody's rights are in that situation. You know, eventually they did make me go get an MRI machine. Again, I contested that. I just said, no, you know, I don't think that that's appropriate. Again, told me that I look guilty if I don't do it. And this is an interesting point where I had interesting conversation, because the cop's like, well, why don't you want to get in there? And I said, well, it's like this, man. It's like, would you take off all your stuff right now and get inside this machine, and if they find something that even looks a little bit off, then you're going to be admitted into the hospital. Would you do that? And he said no. And I said, exactly. I'm not trying to claim any something about an MRI machine or this or that. It's stating that no reasonable person would consent to what they're obviously trying to do, especially after the police called themselves a conflict of interest and are falsely arresting me. It looks like they're digging for a reason. Right? And inside of that, like, it was very unnerving knowing that that's what they were doing. Imagine knowing that they were digging that hard to try to find a reason to have you literally terrorized. And I want to say something to the operator of the MRI machine. It was a younger girl. I want to say thank you for being kind. Thank you for recognizing in that moment that, you know that I was being completely calm and rational, and maybe now that you know the situation that the police were framing me and all this backstory, you'll understand why I was so hesitant to agree to that. But I do want to say that it matters. Your actions matter, and the way that you talked to me and the way that you treated me was very dignified, and I want to say thank you for that. So thank you. There was nothing that you could do. You were just doing your job. And, I went back and I sat with this guy. Now, I was with him for a long time. And he told me I was going to be with him until 6 o'clock in the morning. And while I was with him, we talked about different stuff, like with Romans. We talked about like dominance and about it was just like really cool conversation, like really cool, and just interesting. And I had asked him at one point. I seen these officers sitting off to the side, and this is the point's going to be really important, guys. They brought this guy in, and he was very distressed. He was walking back and forth, like very notably, and he was self-admittedly on drugs. And as he walked by, he looked at me and said, "Man," he's like, "if you got a problem," he's like, "you're in the right place." Like, he was like sketched, right? But he didn't seem like a bad person at all. Like, I didn't get that kind of vibe from him. But like very, very like distressed. He obviously had something going on. I'd assume it was drugs or some sort of form of withdrawal. But I'm not a doctor. I definitely had sympathy for the guy, because he was obviously distressed, but he was also trying to keep that in check. And I'm just sitting there. I promise you, I sat there the whole time. I didn't do anything. I just sat there. And I'd asked my office, because I just talked to him about some basic stuff, and I said, like, how much do you think J.D. Irving would stay out or pay to stay out of prison? $10,000, $100,000, $1,000,000, $10 million? And I seen him kind of look off and daydream a little bit. Well, you can't say daydream, because I'm not saying it in a bad way, but really think about that for a second, right? But then I looked over, and those two officers that were handling that guy, they were looking at me. Like, they were looking, and one guy's face was red. I wasn't being rude or anything like that. Nothing like that at all. I was asking the question. And you're going to see why that's really important here down the line. So, well, at the same time, there was another person that the police had brought in, and this guy was a scary, sketchy dude. And he's the very reason that people should respect the police. So there's like this dual dynamic, and I completely appreciate that. I appreciate the position that a lot of officers are put in. To have to deal with somebody who's talking about stabbing you, and then going on that you're just racist and stuff, like watching them play the race card and race bait people. I mean, I've been race baited, so obviously the officers are going to be race baited. Right? And to watch this type of aggression, nobody wants to deal with that. Not one person judging the police would want to deal with that person that I had seen. It was scary. And it was a very difficult situation. I told my officer, I will not move from this chair if you have to deal with that person, because it was so scary. I was scared for those officers looking after him. I was scared for everybody in that hospital. And everybody, one of you would, and you'd be very grateful that those officers were dealing with that. So keep that in mind. So eventually, at some point, they'd come and they put a giant sticker on my book bag that said Scott, right? And they'd taken my book bag. And then eventually, many hours later, I went to speak to a nurse, and I told her, I was like, look, I'm got all this evidence and stuff. I did send the emails stuff saying I was going down. I did my best. I just really want to go home. and said that, you know, did my, anyway, so then I had to wait for a doctor. And this is where it got really problematic and just like, it's so humiliating. So this admitting doctor comes in and, hey buddy, and she's like, oh, no, 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 talk about it, it's okay. And I was like, well, you know, is my privacy guaranteed here if I talk about this? Like, you know, because I'm being denied a lawyer, I'm like all this different stuff, and now now I'm being told I need to talk about this, or basically I'm going to be admitted. So yeah, I'm being left with no choice whatsoever, and now the officers are just sitting right beside me, within like 5 feet of me, on the other side. So I didn't talk about that, right? I was just like, and I explained to her, like, look, I went through a lot in these last couple years, and I did my homework on this, and I have like a lot of evidence, and you know, different stuff had happened. I didn't go into like crazy stuff about it, didn't go into all of that. I was like, and said, you know, I did, and the police themselves called themselves a conflict of interest. I explained to her what had happened, that they said they were conflict of interest, went to get me a paper to file a complaint, and then just came back and arrested me. I had also told her this was not all about me, and you'll see that reiterated in different emails that I had sent, but also in the different reviews that I submitted, especially like December 23rd, 2021. And, you know, even the day I submitted The Wolf in the Neural Network, it shows I said this is completely open for interpretation, and I never said it was all about me. Never. And in fact, I said that, you know, this seems like it's related to whatever was going on with J.D. Irving and Post Media and this David Pudge Lee's guy, where they threatened to sue him and the government was sharing information back and forth with J.D. Irving, which is completely reasonable and logical and can be Googled. But what becomes even more concerning is I said, look, you can look some of this up on your phone just to do a rough check. And she looked at me and said, I'm not here to fact check you. Like, just completely rude about it, right? But you'll see that the admittance to and under IPTA must be based on facts and evidence. So if it's not based on facts and evidence, she doesn't even want to fact check it herself, then what's it based on when somebody's sitting there completely cool, calm, and collected? It's based on her prejudice, her bias, and her self-imposed ignorance. It's based on her hate and her desire for violence. And when you see what she did next, it'll show you exactly what kind of a monster she was. Now, in the middle of talking, this is where it gets really interesting. A different officer I had not met just walks into the room, and he just stands there. And I was like, looked at him, I'm like, and she kind of looked at him like, and then he's like, Scott? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, I guess I'm going to take over from here. And like I said, now I was supposed to be with my officer until 6 o'clock. And then he goes over and just sits in that room with the officer that I was with for the entire time. And I remember how my officer looked at him, like, what are you doing here? I could tell that look on his face, like he was confused as well. Like, you can say, Scott, you can't know that, and that's a fair argument. But I know people. He knew something was weird, and what's interesting is my officer, just before the doctor came in, he came in and said, Scott, he's like, I gotta say, he's like, you know, this was some of the best conversation that I had. He's like, I really didn't expect that. He's like, you know, I really hope someday you can trust somebody. And I was like, listen, thank you, man. Like, I think you're probably a really good guy. And thank you for that. But, you know, I've seen enough, like, bad people. I've had people do bad stuff to me. And you know what? I'm done sitting back and not saying something about not doing something about it, because it's never going to change, and it's just going to keep happening, and it's just going to happen to somebody else. And if I can't do something about it, then who can? So, like, I know that inside of him there's a very good person. I know there's a good person in there, no matter what he tries to say about me or whatever might happen. I know that. And we all get put in shitty situations and awful situations, man, if you're watching. So there's nothing. So anyway, after that guy had walked in and he had left, I had said to the doctor, I was like, is that really appropriate? That's now what's happening? Like, I don't feel comfortable talking about this anymore. I just want to go home. And she said, oh, that's kind of paranoid, isn't it? I was like, what? I was like, no, we talked about privacy and you said, no, expectation of privacy, and that's not very private, and now they're just sitting right here next to us, and I don't know who this guy is. And why do I have to talk about this? And she's like, oh, well, you're paranoid. Obviously, you're paranoid. I'm going to have to keep you. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, you don't have a place to stay. I'm like, yes, I do. People were expecting me. Like, they have small children and were okay with me staying there. Even after knowing I got admitted, they still gave me their key. Because they know me. Right? Said I didn't have a way to get home. I did. I had $40 in my wallet. She said that I was paranoid about the police following me. I said, that's a lie, because I've never said that at all. And you can check the Wolf in the Network, the alpha version, that there's no notice of that. The last instance I'd recorded was in 2021. And that's partly why I had to email all those people, because it had to stop. Because it was escalating and getting worse. And I didn't go on all that stuff with her. I never even said anything to her about the police, but you'll see, because of the police report and what Halifax Regional Police told her, she is completely prejudiced, completely biased. Somebody sitting there completely calm. And so I was like, nothing I could do. I'm sitting there completely calm, even being told now I'm going to be admitted and kept against my will after all this happened. I'm still completely calm. And what she does, this is super important, she gets up and she goes to the door and she's like, hey guys, to the cops. And she's like, he thinks he can hear you. You can hear him. She's like, here, Scott. She gets up. She straddles the door. And this is serious. She straddles the door. She's like, here, Scott. Test it. Test it. Straddles the door. Test it. See if they can hear you. I'm like, no, thank you. I think. She's like, no, come on. He thinks you can hear him. And all I did, and I promise you all, is I looked off at the corner. I'm like, this is really inappropriate right now. I will. Remember, I said I would testify to Parliament under polygraph. Now, the officer that I was with all that time, he kind of chuckled, but you knew he was really uncomfortable with the way that she had acted. Now, that new officer, he laughed like it was the best thing he ever heard. He was so happy that they were humiliating me. He was just like, that was the best thing he'd seen all night. I'm sitting there completely calm, cool, and collected and rational. I'm being humiliated by this woman after police themselves are calling themselves a conflict of interest and just arrest me. Call me paranoid. Look at all this evidence, honey. You're going to call me paranoid? I'm a global technical expert. Massive amounts of evidence. And what are you going to say? You should go to the police? You fucking monster. But it gets even worse. It gets much worse. And this is what Nova Scotia Health Authority is trying to cover up. So, Buddy then comes to take the handcuffs off me, and he's like, do you have any questions for me? I said, no, ma'am, but this isn't right. He said, I asked you, do you have any questions for me? I'm just sitting there completely calm, completely respectful, and this man comes and yells in my face like some kind of fucking pig. I didn't do anything to him. That right there is a garbage fucking person and a garbage cop. Garbage. Garbage fucking human being. Now, what's important is just before that, I had stated I told the doctor that I was denied a lawyer for 10 hours. She told me no, I wasn't. How can she know what I was denied in those 10 hours? She can't. So why would she say that? She's going to say she didn't, right? She's going to lie. That monster is obviously going to lie. And she's like, well, do you want a lawyer now? And I'm like, I'm going to wait till these officers leave. and then I'd like to contact a lawyer. And she's like, okay, yeah. And so they all kind of left, and I went out to ask them for a phone to contact a lawyer what my rights were, because nobody was telling me. And they said, honey, there is no phone. I was absolutely denied a lawyer. I had my blood taken against my will. I had been forced to get an MRI machine. That doctor completely fucking humiliated me and degraded me. Her actions made it all right for that officer to talk to me like that because I was just some retard. It's disgusting behavior, and you think she's going to tell the truth about that? No. That coward's going to hide from who and what she really is. But get this, so here's what happens next. Obviously, I had to wait for an ambulance, so I'm waiting there, and I was like, where's my book bag? And they're like, it's already been taken over. I was like, what do you mean? How could it be taken over before I seen a doctor? That's right. Already taken over. And so I get transferred over, and my book bag's there waiting for me. Buddy with silver eyebrows gave it to me, and he said, you know, the only thing I had to take out was the Axe body spray. He's like, we can't have it. I'm like, oh, that's fine. I'm like, whatever, right? And so I got my book bag, and there was a really kind woman there. She's like, Scott, are you hungry? And I was like, no, I'm not. She's like, Scott, you're hungry. She's like, let me make you some toast. At least let me make you some toast. I was like, you know what, okay. And she made me some toast, and I was hungry. And it was really kind of her, and she was really nice to me. And again, they took my blood pressure, I think, when I got over there. And again, it's perfect. Like, my blood pressure's fine the entire time, right? Like, it's not somebody who's manic at all. And then, you know, I had to go to my room. My roommate was a talkative guy. He talked and talked and talked. It was really early in the morning, so I didn't get any sleep. And then when I did doze off, you know, like 7, 8 o'clock, I woke up shortly after to a man standing over top of me. And he immediately touches me right here. And I was like, I jumped back in the bed. I was like, and he's like, oh, I'm a doctor here. He's like, oh, you how's your stomach? He's like, how many joints you smoke? I'm like, just like kind of in shock of what's happening. I'm like, what is... Anyways, this guy leaves, and I'm just like, I don't know what's really going on right now. And I went out, and, you know, I'd asked for a phone, and I couldn't figure out how to dial out to call my mother or anybody to tell them what was going on. You had to dial like a number first. I had no idea. And I was kind of tired from everything that was happening. And they were like, you know, get some breakfast. And I went into the lineup. And that's when that guy, this is super important, right? The guy who was sketched out, walking around really quick, acting very erratic, he comes up to me and he's like, man, he's like, you can't talk around the police like that. He's like, they got your book bag and they went all through it. He's like, went through your wallet and everything. He's like, you can't talk around the police like that. Are you stupid? And he's like, I noticed that you had 2 20s in there. He's like, do you want a rock, paper, scissors for one of the 20s? And I'm like, no. But thank you for telling me the truth. Thank you for being a decent human being and at least telling me what happened. So, right there, my book bag got sent over before I ever seen a doctor, and now it got sent with these officers that heard me talking about how much J.D. Irving would pay to stay out of jail. That's what it sounds like. Nova Scotia Health Authority is trying to tell me that it didn't happen and I'm just a liar. That's right, Karen Hornberger is telling, the privacy officer and director is telling me I must have deserved it. I'm a liar. I'm making it all up. And then she tried to say, after several submissions, that no, you mean it must have just been at Mount Hope and then it went through it. It's like, how can you not know from what I'm saying? You obviously know that you're lying about this, Karen. Like, what is wrong with you? But she knows how bad this is, right? So she's going to lie, cheat, and steal. And she knows the directors are directly involved, so what do you think she's going to do? She's going to try to frame me. She thinks she's going to face that about the admitting doctor? No. And so you'll note that I'm also going to be doing a full review on Karen Hornberger and her abject failure in this. that's going to cover not only August 2nd, but March 13th, 2023. And what I did to have to explain to Karen Hornberger in pretty little pictures her job and what she actually signed off on, which is an embarrassment on its own that I have to explain it to her in pretty little pictures. It goes through documents she personally had signed off on explaining what personal health information is, and the fact that NSHA is a custodian of all patient data that is generated from patient care at NSHA facilities. Right? So, and as custodian, NSHA is ultimately accountable to the patient for safeguarding information from breach, which means that once they took me into their care with Nova Scotia Health Authority, they become custodians of my information, which means by allowing those people to go through my wallet, and so my credit cards, my driver's license, my health card, they actually caused a privacy breach, which Karen Hornberger is obligated, and those employees are obligated to report immediately, and stating where I did state that this occurred, they did not follow through on what they were supposed to do, and you can see her lying about it here in this mail, because she knows she's in a lot of trouble. And but you can say, okay, Scott, well, about your financial stuff, well, that's still a fact. I don't know if they took pictures of my stuff. I don't know. Was my identity breached? I don't know. Did they say? I don't know. Right? But you'll note personal health information explicitly states registration information, including health card. My health card was in my wallet, which means they caused a direct privacy breach of my health information, which needs to be reported. I mean, this isn't even that complicated. But what that conversation is going to lead into is a discussion about your rights as a Canadian to record your physician. Right? There's something called the one-party consent law it's referred to, but it's actually a reference to the criminal code, roughly 184 in the criminal code. That allows you to basically record any conversation that you're party to, and it's illegal to record a conversation that you're not party to. And you know that includes acoustic, but also electromagnetic. And the criminal code actually distinguishes between the two. But Karen Hornberger doesn't understand basic science, I guess, or the way these laws are actually worded when she's a privacy director. And you'll state that even on the CMPA website, it says a note on physician use on smartphone recordings. And this is a conversation I'm going to ask CTV to do a whole section on, because I think it's really important for people to understand your rights here. Although patients can record their clinician encounters without a physician's consent, the same does not hold true for physicians. And you'll see why that becomes more applicable to the wider argument about how long can somebody be recorded before they need to consent to it. So I'll leave that there and we'll jump back to it. And to add about my book bag, like, think about the odds of them just happening to happen with my book bag. Either it's a really big coincidence, which is very unlikely, that it happens all the time, which is slightly more likely, that I'm lying, which you can say I'm lying, but why would I lie about this? I mean, I'm pretty consistent, and I've been consistent, and I'm not lying. I will take a polygraph in front of all of Canada. But then the most likely is that they wanted to put my book bag with somebody who was sketched out acting strange, so they could say that that was me. So they could try to claim plausible deniability. Right? Think about it. Those staff would say, oh yeah, we seen Buddy's name, like, it had a big sticker with my name on it. So then they could lie about who it was. And you'll see that I even reported that somebody calling to ask about me, they said, no, he's really irritated and I think it's best he doesn't talk to me. I was completely calm and rational to everybody. And I could use the phone and stuff, so what was the problem? Because they needed to make me look like a different person. And that makes the most sense. Just a thought. So I then had to speak with Dr. Holmes, would have been the psychologist that would have been assigned to me. And I was very calm, rational. I was awake for a long time at that point. I couldn't get a hold of my mother or anybody to tell them even where I was at. They were really worried, obviously. I told her about the police being conflicts of interest, and you know, she asked me questions about my life and what I've been doing, and this part here is just completely fucking awful. I told her, you know, I was looking after my mother the last, like, few years, and she told me that that wasn't a job. She said that, you know, I wasted my life, and it's like, are you serious? I'm like, you don't know me. Why are you talking to me like this? She's like, well, why didn't you go to the city and get a job? Like, Who are you to tell me how to live my life, first off, like that? That if it doesn't fit your model of the delusion that you want, that there must be something wrong with me? What kind of fucking idiot does something like that? You do, Dr. Holmes. She degraded me. She humiliated me. I take care of not only my mother, but I help take care of my 80-year-old aunt. I drive her to all of her doctor appointments and stuff. But also at the same time, guys, I was bartending and stuff the whole time I was living out here. And I further my education. You see, I'm extremely well educated in these different topics. That's because I took the time to properly educate myself, because I think education is extremely important. But Dr. Holmes doesn't appreciate that. Right? I tried to tell her, I'm like, you do realize there was a pandemic, and if my mother would have got COVID, she would have died. As she's sitting there wearing a mask, she's trying to tell me, why didn't I go to the city when I have all the expenses? I have a house that I have to pay for out here, all these expenses. So if I move to the city, I now have to pay for this house and pay all my expenses in the city, but also now pay for all the extra care that my mother's going to need. But also, since it's a pandemic, you're not allowed to go anywhere. You can't even go outside. You can't even interact with anybody. You can't even really go to the store. And you don't know how bad it's going to be. But yeah, you should move to the city when the job market around the world is collapsing. This is a completely irrational, delusional person. Dr. Holmes is completely irrational and delusional. She has no idea what she's talking about. That's right, but I'm unreasonable. And, I told her about the the HRP saying that they were a conflict of interest. I said, I did all my, investigation. I gathered my evidence before I went down. They lied about all of it. I've been completely calm. I told her about my book bag being sent over before I ever seen a doctor. I told her about the diddler touching my stomach. And I told her about there being shit on the sheets. There was shit on the sheets that I was sleeping on. That's right. So you want to know what she has to cover up? She's sitting there wearing a mask and she can't understand that there was a global pandemic. My mother had pneumonia several times. Like, if she got COVID, she'd have died. I explained to her that I never begged to get out of there, guys. Never once. I told her, I was like, no, my mother's really sick. She can't be left alone. She really can't be left alone. I was like, I will go talk to anybody. I will come back in here and talk to you, but I got to go make sure that she's all right. Didn't matter to this woman. Didn't matter, because she had to cover up what they did. She seen me being completely calm, cool, collected, respectful, intelligent, and dignified. I was treating her with respect, but she was degrading and humiliating me. So what now, Dr. Holmes? What are you going to say? Who should I take this to? You were asked, who should I take this to? It's the police. Look what you did. Look what they did. The chief of police won't even face this. Who should I take this to? Right? You're going to tell me I did something wrong? As you now admit me and force drugs into me? Severe violence? Drugs that have a 46% chance at erectile dysfunction? You're a fucking monster. Who thinks she's going to face that? Nobody. So, she's never going to face it. She's going to blame me. She's going to pretend to be the victim. Now, you'll note that I recorded the session where she told me she was keeping me. And inside of this session, you can hear me being completely rational. I didn't think it appropriate to now mention any other details. She told me she's just keeping me. So, I mean, if I talked about anything else, what do you think? Of course she's going to be worse. She's unreasonable. Right? So you hear me ask her, I'm going to do a full review of the recording so I can really go over it. She tells me, she says that, like, oh yeah, no, I believe you did all these things with all these people, but it's just so fucking inconsistent. And, yeah, so they say they're just keeping me. And you can hear she doesn't explain to me the side effects of the drugs. She doesn't explain to me anything. She's just keeping me. I did nothing to her. Nothing. And you'll see the whole time I was there, I was completely respectful and dignified. Treated her staff with respect, her with respect. And we're going to talk about that instance because she needs a proper review. Right? Because now what she's going to sit down and say, she's the victim. She wants to sit down and talk about this. She deserves rights. She deserves due process, but I didn't. Now, what's important to note here is that several days after I got out, so they kept me 10 days, that my mother was so sick, she thought I was only in there for 3 days, and within 6 days, we got a note back from the doctor that they found a 17-centimeter mass in her stomach, and it was leaking pus, and it was making her delirious. She fell several times when I was in the hospital. She crushed the garbage can. She was covered in bruises. And she ultimately, in the care of Nova Scotia Health Authority, died of a urinary tract infection. That's right. Because Nova Scotia Health Authority doesn't consider it a job. Me cleaning her, keeping her dignified for years, giving her a quality of life that she would never have had. But it's not a job, and to humiliate me and do you think Dr. Holmes is going to face what she is? No. See, it was never about me. It was always about her not being able to face her own delusions about herself. Right? I wasn't delusional about anything. I admitted my bias. I said, look, I only assigned a 1% to these things. Like with the McNeil thing, I only signed a 1%. You see all the evidence. I don't even need that to tell the story. Who would tell me that's unreasonable for giving that a 1%? Nobody. While it's important to note, I told her that I only aimed for a 70%, and you'll see that's consistent in my work. Right? Now, I believe I'm hitting much higher, but I only aimed for a 70%, where I only assigned 1% to certain events and used data to inflate them. Right? What else could somebody do? Right? But also at the same time, I don't believe in ghosts, demons, angels. I don't believe in religion. I don't believe in alien abductions. I walk in the dark. I don't live my life delusional about these kinds of things. And I fully respect people who want to believe something. Hey, that's fine. But don't let that damage my life. If somebody went in there saying, I believe in ghosts, I've seen well, that's delirious. I was going in there with data, facts, and evidence. Calm, cool, and collected. So to state that I'm delusional, but somebody like that who believes in religion or ghosts or all this stuff, this person isn't delusional and doesn't have something going on with them, of course they do. Right? But I'm delusional or irrational because of, where you'll note, you state that it wasn't my behavior, it's what I'm talking about, which means then the facts and evidence. She tried to pretend she couldn't see the relationship between all of this and Halifax Regional Police. Robin McNeil and Stephen McNeil are brothers. That's common knowledge. Well, several of his family members are directly involved in HRP and RCMP. Right? In any of this, she could have just Googled some of it and would have been like a 27-second, not even 27, it was 7 seconds to Google search it. And she's telling me she's trying to help me live my best life? Is she lying, cheating, and stealing? And pumping me full of erectile dysfunction? So, Dr. Holmes, how do you feel 2 days after my admittance, they found RCMP sneaking around a house with flashlights? How do you feel that they're deleting the EMIC contracts? How do you feel that RCMP said that because you said I'm retarded, I don't deserve rights? How do you feel about that?
And they told me, Jessica, that if I even mention J.D. Irving, they will have me fucking arrested and pumped full of drugs.
It's not your fault, right? Isn't it something you want that power? You want that authority. You want to pretend you're the big freaking hero. But when it comes down to you accepting responsibility for your delusions, what are you doing? You're going to hide like a coward because you can't face it. As I'm there facing this all alone, facing my bias, being completely open and transparent. But look at you. Right? And what are you going to say you deserve? You deserve a pat on the back and to be called a hero. It's monsters, guys. The world is full of monsters, and I just happened to encounter them. And this was like the Stanford prison study, because when you see what actually happened while I was in the care of these guys, like, I knew what was going on. At the same time, RCMP was doing the review of spyware. And you'll see how this all plays in, and mentioned the Pegasus spyware. And as they did, I was reading Moby Dick with my feet up, and David Fraser was on CTV talking about spyware, and these people are all involved in this. And she's going to say, I didn't know what was going on, I'm stupid, I don't know. No, the facts are, Dr. Holmes, you were a piece of garbage for a human being. And even afterwards, I told Nova Scotia Health Authority, you shouldn't have to lose your license, and look what you fucking pieces of shit did. Because you couldn't help but be pieces of fucking shit. You could have fucking dealt with this. The privacy person could have contacted me, you didn't. Millions of ways to try to resolve this. Instead, you blamed me. Because I was an easy target, the little faggot dog that you could beat and abuse. You seen somebody weak enough. Like Dr. Holmes basically said, it can't be me because this is McNeil or Trudeau. They've got the right last names in Irving. Right? You hear me say to her in the recording, like, look, if I was a security researcher, which I am, you would say, good job. And I said, if I was a detective, which I basically, you would say, good job. I'm a global technical expert, and I absolutely nailed this. But because my last name is George, I'm nobody and nothing, and I deserved all that. That's exactly what it was. And you think she's going to face that? Absolutely not. You watch that monster pretend to be the victim. You wait and watch that thing pretend to be the victim. So I hope that partly explains why Tim Houston would show up the night my mother died, why Nova Scotia Health Authority would pull that, and why he thought he would pull that, and where their desperation came from. You see, all these people needed to frame me again so they could try to justify what they did. And when you see the review that I actually wrote up the night that my mother died, it highlighted exactly what they were doing, and then exactly what they did on March 13th. Like, it was spooky. It was right. It was to the point. And, yeah, these people knew what they did was wrong, like very, very wrong, and then they needed to cover it up. And since I'm nobody and I don't have any money or anything, look what these monsters tried to do. Look what Karen Hornberger's trying to do. These people are real monsters. If they see somebody weak enough or has a weakness, they are going to pounce on them. They're opportunistic predators. They're not decent people, guys. They're not decent people. And you think Justin Trudeau's going to face that? That basically, and Jagmeet Singh, that because they can't face it, they don't want to look daddy in the face and face it, they tried to have me chemically castrated? No, because they're not men. These aren't men, right? They're not decent people. A decent person would have dealt with this. And you're going to say, okay, well, maybe they want to deal with it. Well, then why didn't Tim Houston come forward? Why hasn't somebody come forward? If they weren't going to cause me troubles with this, why hasn't one of them come forward? Because they were always going to lie about it and cause me massive financial harm if I tried to deal with this in any way. That's obviously what they were going to do. Take a look with the lawyers. They even fucked with the lawyers to specifically make it worse on me and make it harder. And then they're going to say, why didn't you get a lawyer? After nobody would take this because it was J.D. Irving. And look how they fucked with the lawyers because everybody was rightfully scared about it. That's the game they play. These are opportunistic predators. They're not good people. Don't let them lie to you about it. They had how many months now? 6 months since to come forward? It was to frame me. Amazing. It's actually amazing. It's like a Stanford prison study, right? And you'll see that came up multiple times in my talks about this. So anyways, I'd like to leave it there. And I'll leave like an Easter egg. Anybody who likes Battlestar Galactica. Because like there were many Easter eggs left inside of this investigation just so that people could go back and say, Scott knew what was going on. Just based on these Easter eggs. And so figure out how that relates to Moby Dick. And I'll give you another hint. 4 lights. Alright, so have fun with that. So anyways, thank you for watching. I know it was just like a rant, but you know, I had to get that part out. And have a good day.